Thanks very much, John, and thanks for covering the stock. There are a few shareholders here that I've met, but I'm willing to bet that most of you have never heard of Inventus. We've done next to no marketing in the last 2 years. This is the first conference that I've presented to as CEO, and so it's fairly fresh information that I'm going to share with you today. As John mentioned, maybe I shouldn't call it a paleoplacer anymore. Maybe I should just talk about conglomerate-hosted gold. We have to keep our minds open to the genesis of these things. But Inventus does have a very WITS-like analog in Ontario. It's ideally located. It's about 65 kilometers outside of the mining town of Sudbury. It's very nice not to have a remote project. I work in downtown Toronto. I can be on the project in 3 hours. It's accessible year-round by road. It's really in an ideal place to build a mine. We consolidated ownership of the property. Previously, it was a slightly contentious joint venture situation that at one point ended up in some arbitration. That was really unpopular with the market, and it was something that needed to be dealt with. We now control it 100%, and our joint venture partner is one of our largest shareholders. Golda Pardo occurs in flat-lying conglomerate reefs. Reefs just mean in layers of conglomerate rock. Flat-lying is important. In South Africa, the reefs dip at 20 to 30 degrees, and before you know it, you're mining at 13,000 feet. Where we have it, the dip is usually negligible. It's topography that changes and some faulting, but we have it at or near surface. And it is very similar to the Witwatersrand. It's been discussed at length already today, so I won't go into it. But extremely important deposit type, and anything analogous to that should have your interest. Our drilling has shown over the years that this is laterally extensive, but the drilling has suffered from being somewhat spotty. And that's frustrated a lot of people. It's made it difficult to think about resources, but it's all part of the WITS experience, if you like. The boulder conglomerate of the Mississauga Formation, we give formations different names. This one's Mississauga according to their age. It has the high-grade gold, and that's what we're interested in finding. The grades that you have on your screen are what really attracted me to the project and to the company. Anywhere you have 36.5 grams over 31 meters in our highest grade 007 zone, and 5.2 grams over 140 meters in the largest outcrop. These are channel samples. Think of them as horizontal boreholes that are basically just cut out of the outcropping rocks. Regionally, all of these conglomerates are in the Heronaeun supergroup. It's a very large package of sedimentary rocks, which rivals the WITS in terms of scale. Not a whole lot of gold has been found in it. We have it at Pardo. And the question is, and John's asked it as well, is this an isolated freak show? And we don't think it is, and I'll tell you why. In McCarthy Township, which is about 20 kilometers to the west, there's a single drill hole, and I don't mean a single drill hole that hit anything. I mean in the township, there's only one drill hole, and that hit 7.5 grams gold in a conglomerate at 400 meters. In Voigt Township, we have conglomerate surface samples with 11 grams per ton. That's 15 kilometers in the other direction. So we have a window at Pardo where this particular horizon is right at surface, and we can examine it, but it exists over a very, very broad area. If you were standing on the property, this is essentially what you would see. This is the Godzilla outcrop. It's one of the largest outcropping areas that we have. The channel that you can see that runs diagonally through the picture was part of the one that graded 5.2 grams of 140 meters. At one point, we had a gentleman from South Africa who's now a vice president of Witwatersrand Consolidated, subsidiary of Sibanye, and he walked around the property, kicked some rocks, and then turned to the person he was with and said, "Why aren't you mining this?" And the whole idea that you would spend a lot of money drilling and being frustrated with spotty grades and not being able to produce a resource, in the mind of a South African just didn't compute. The only way that you find out how these things run is by mining them. Here's a picture of some channel samples, sort of compares and contrasts what we have to the WITS. The bottom is a sample of quartz pebble conglomerate from the WITS. The top is a sample from the 007 reef that was running about an ounce per ton. In these conglomerates, all of the gold is in the matrix. The class material has absolutely nothing in it. The gold, like the Wits, is associated with pyrite. And I only show you this for metallurgical purposes, just so that the gold is not locked up. It's free gold, it's on the outside of the pyrite, but it's very associated with pyrite and detrital pyrite. We have a nugget effect, although almost all our gold is very, very fine, similar to the Wits, but it tends to cluster. And here's an example from a drill hole that we drilled earlier this year. And you get this cluster of very, very fine gold grains. And that creates a nugget effect without any nuggets being present. And so makes it quite difficult to estimate grade when you have a nugget or an absence of a nugget. We did some studies this year, which I found quite interesting. One was just to see what we could do in terms of gravity recovery of the gold. This was an example where we basically took a 100-kilo sample from the 007 zone. We ran it across a rudimentary gravity separation system. We got 100% free gold in part of it, and then we got a load of pyrite concentrate that was high in gold. Overall, that sample that we took ran about 20 grams per ton. We did another study which looked at sorting this material, which was very interesting. Basically, if all of the class material is unmineralized, one should think about trying to reject that to waste so that you can upgrade the grade and really reduce the size of your processing plant. And that was very successful, and I can talk in detail about that at the booth afterwards. This is the area that we're looking at. The red area is the only area that's had really intensive exploration. And that's where our 2017 drill program was focused. We drilled 65 holes in 2017. It had a different sampling procedure. I'd say it was overall much more successful than previous campaigns. It was a 50 by 50 meter grid drilling program. You can see some of the results on the left-hand side of the screen. We drilled the best hole, or the best interval ever on the property, which was 13 grams over 3.2 meters. And remember, you would never expect to get more than 1 to 3 meters thickness in these Mississauga beds. We have modeled it based on the drilling that we've done, and this is just a leapfrog model that shows the grade thickness of or the grade in this case, of the various areas. Red is a hotter grade than the blue. And you can sort of start to see things channeling. And similar to the Wits, in the Wits they call them pay streaks. Here we call them channels in the paleo surface. That's what's concentrated the high grade, and that's what we need to track. If you use the Wits, though, as an analog, usually pay streaks are less than 10 meters wide. And if you're doing a 50 by 50 meter drill program, you can easily miss them. And so detailed drilling is required, and also sampling, bulk sampling. This just tries to explain the challenges with sampling in a simple way. The gold is unevenly distributed. That's the nugget effect. You can see that the matrix only accounts for a small percentage of the total mass. Basically, if you think about that in the inverse, all of our results, our grades, are diluted by 60 to 90% of internal waste, which is unmineralized. Grade determination is not unusual. Novos had that experience in the Wits. They didn't even try and define the grade until they were down mining it. They would drill these reefs on 2 by 2 kilometer centers and then go in and sample them. So the next phase that we're looking at is a bulk sampling program, and that's really where we are. We've started on it this week. We've done the drilling we said we were going to do. We've defined an area that we think contains about 1.7 million tons of material. The grade is uncertain. I don't think we'll be able to estimate the grade without going in and mining some of it. We've raised a bit of money just very recently, $1 million. We only raised $1 million because we only needed $1 million. And I think that the bulk sample will be a big catalyst if it's successful, and will open people's mind to this deposit and deposits of its type. And the next stage is basically to extract 1,000 tons, run it through a mill, and see what the contained gold is, and compare that to what we got in the drilling. Bigger picture, there's a lot of these conglomerates out there, and there's lots of exploration potential when and if the bulk sampling is successful. 107 million shares outstanding. And the share owners are people that you will recognize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan.